Now today I want to talk about a book that was very important to me when I first got my copy, which would have been the 80s, early 80s, because this book, there was nothing else around like it during that period. It's gone through a couple of revisions over the years. There's been different editions, and I currently own an updated edition on my Kindle. But this I'm going to show you now is the original copy of the book I had, and it's the James Bond Bedside Companion by Raymond Benson. Now, Raymond Benson, as you may know, was the third official author selected by Glidrose Publications, or Ian Fleming Publications as it is now, to continue with the James Bond series continuation novels. Raymond produced 6 original novels for them and a couple of novelizations, and since then other authors have taken over. But at the time that Raymond wrote this, the Bond deal with Glidrose or Ian Fleming Publication, whatever, hadn't happened. Benson hadn't written any of his James Bond novels, and several of his continuation novels are really superb. But this was the first James Bond related thing that Benson wrote. I'm just going to check the cover date, because this is a very old copy. It's very well thumbed. I've had it for many years. So yeah, it was 1984 when this first hit the stands. This is the British version. I'm not sure if the American version, the originally published version, had a different cover, but I'll try and find that out, and I'll post these photos somewhere around this video. But this is the UK version, and this cover is the only cover I've ever known. I don't think this was actually a first 1984 edition. I think this came out several years later, and it's probably... I'm not sure about whether this is the original book that I bought, or if it may be a second copy. I've got a feeling it was a second copy because I wore the first one out. So it's got a really cool cover here, James Bondian cover. You've got the hat here, you've got the gun, you've got some keys here, you've got a tarantula there, some cigarettes here, and no, they're Moreland and Company cigarettes, because as a James Bond fan knows, many James Bond fans will know, Bond had his own signature cigarettes made with the 3 gold rings, and that's all there. So it's a nice amount of detail. Now, what is Raymond Benson's James Bond Bedside Companion? Well, for many years it's been known as the James Bond Bible. It gives you all the information. The introduction starts. Ian Fleming was of the 20th century, and indeed his creation, James Bond, who emerged full-blown from his imagination as a Greek god from the brow of Zeus, may be one of the 20th century's landmarks. The 20th century marked the conflicts of divergent forces, and a number of these forces converged within Ian Fleming. Typical of 20th century artists, Ian Fleming was many people, and indeed some of the most pointed anecdotes of the century can apply to him. Thus, in a debate with George Bernard Shaw, Graham Wallis read 2 contrary opinions by Shaw, adding sarcastically, "I suggest that on different occasions Mr. Shaw speaks like 2 different people." "What?" screamed the red-headed Irishman, leaping from the seat. "Only 2? And the introduction is quite interesting. It goes on now. The way these book is set out is it's set out into sections. So obviously it's got a big section to do with the films. It's got a big section to do with Ian Fleming. My favourite aspect of this book is all the information it gives about the novels, and not only the original novels but the continuation novels of John Gardner. I doubt if it would have even crossed Mr. Benson's mind, Raymond's mind here, when he was writing this, that one day he would be officially penning, not producing fan fiction, but officially penning James Bond novels. Opens up with a section about the James Bond phenomenon, and this is quite a large section. It's incredibly detailed, with some lovely illustrations in here. We've got a lot of the James Bond merchandise there from where the first rush of Bond mania, like Bond aftershave, Bond toys. So the section, the James Bond phenomenon, which is one of the really interesting sections in the book, although every section is interesting, goes all the way through into the 70s and into the 80s, and then part 2 of the book is a remembrance of Ian Fleming, and a lovely picture of Ian Fleming in Jamaica, where his home Goldeneye was. There, that photo was taken in 1951. And it goes through it gives a full, very detailed life story of Ian Fleming, his background, his early life, and that leads us through to a section about his fictional creation, Mr. Bond. So we get Bond's life as well, and the author here, Raymond Benson, draws heavily on John Pearson's biography, fictional biography of 007. I'm drinking a blended scotch here. It's label 5. Pretty good. So then the next section of the book is the novels, which gives a complete and very, very detailed and very well observed reviews of each of Fleming's novels. I'm trying to get the end here. Yes, so at the end, after The Living Daylights, the posthumously published Living Daylights, Benson moves on to look at the non-Fleming novels. So in other words, the James Bond continuation novels, and he starts with the first one, Colonel's Son, which was published in 1968, under the name Robert Markham. Robert Markham was a pen name which initially Glidrose had intended to use to give to a number of authors to continue on the stories of James Bond, but because Colonel's Son wasn't initially as successful as it had been expected, that fell apart, and the James Bond series lay in limbo for a long time until John Gardner took off. So I'm just going to read you the opening of Raymond Benson's review of Colonel's Son by Robert Markham, aka Kingsley Amis, in his book. Colonel's Son by Robert Markham, open brackets, Kingsley Amis, close brackets, continues the Bond saga and is a worthy success at the Ian Fleming novels. It is not totally faithful to the Fleming books, but it would be foolish to expect a new author to mirror Fleming's style completely. It is important, however, to maintain the continuity of Bond's character, and the events have a direct bearing on Bond's life. Colonel's Son achieves this. Despite a slow middle and an overly complicated plot, Colonel's Son contains several exciting passages, good characterization, and rich details that typify Fleming's work. So that's just the opening of introduction into the world of James Bond novels by writers other than Ian Fleming, but his analysis of the entire novel is absolutely well detailed. It's massive. So it's split into parts after this information, after the initial introduction to the novel, which gives a little bit of the plot elements. We get style and themes, and it tells us that Colonel's Son begins and ends with explosive events. The main problem with the book is the middle, which is slow moving and sometimes a little boring. Well, that's Benson's opinion, not mine. I love Colonel's Son. Also, Benson looks at all the characters in the books, so he goes all through that. And then Benson moves on to the next author who took over the James Bond franchise, and that was John Gardner, who brought out a new James Bond novel after a long hiatus in 1981. Benson, of course, ignores the two novelizations that have been written by Christopher Wood for The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker in the 70s. He ignores that, but that's accepted because those two books are more in the world of the James Bond movies than the literary universe. So he starts off the John Gardner books, and Benson tells us the summer of 1981 was significant for James Bond fans. The first in a new series of novels was published. British mystery writer John Gardner was approached by Glidrose to resurrect Bond from literary limbo, and the result was license renewed. This was followed by For Special Services in 1982 and Icebreaker in 1983. Gardner has since been assigned to write additional 007 novels. Now, obviously, when Benson wrote this book, it was only the 3 Gardner books had been published, and John Gardner would go on to write 15 if you include novelizations, or I think it was 15 original novels actually. It was 15 original novels besides the novelizations he did, so that makes him a far more prolific than Ian Fleming. He wrote far more than Ian Fleming. Raymond Benson, of course, the author of The Bedside Companion, which we're talking about in a moment, would eventually succeed Gardner when Gardner stepped down. So the next section of the book is the films. and again it's set out in the same way of the novels. So we get an introduction which tells us the basic overview of the James Bond story as relates to the movie franchise up to this point, and it opens up with Dr. No. And it tells us that the first James Bond film was produced for only $1 million, and is one of the best in the series. It is simple compared to the rest of the films, and this is the main reason for its success. There's no gadgetry in the film. 007 relies on his wits and strength to accomplish his missions. Character well drawn, and the plot is tight and moves quickly. Well, I fully agree with that, and Benson goes for every single never say never again, I believe. Yeah, because we've got Octopussy, which was, and then we've got Casino Royale, both the 1967 version, the comedy Casino Royale, which really has nothing to do with the Bond canon, and Never Say Never Again, which of course is a remake of Thunderball. It was a rogue Bond film. You can see where this suffered a couple of water damage over the years, the book there, because a couple of these pages. So I'm not sure if this is the first or second edition of this book I've ever had. I only dug it out of the attic today, but it turns out this must be the second copy, because this has got a 1988 update, and it tells us that since the first edition of this book was published in 1984, the James Bond phenomenon has reached a zenith, especially in the summer of 1987 when a climatic 007 became 25 years old. So it tells us all about the rest of the John Gardner novels that came out after the original copy of the James Bond Bedside Companion. So we've got Roll of Honor, Nobody Lives Forever, the terribly titled No Deals, Mr. Bond, which was 1987, and Scorpius. So even this book doesn't contain the entirety of John Gardner's Bond series, because he went on for 15 books. It also updates as a review of A Review to a Kill, and it looks forward to a new Bond with this review of The Living Daylights. So that's the James Bond Bedside Companion. Now, since this has been published, lots of other books share this type of information, but this was the first to really cover everything in such depth, and I maintain that even now this book is essential for any real Bond fan who wants to explore the entire phenomenon from the movies, the novels, and has an interest in the life of Ian Fleming himself. I would say the James Bond Bedside Companion is a must-read. But you found them lost. I've put them off for a great many years. I've just been tidying up my office, so I took some books up the attic, but perversely I brought a few down. So this is James Bond, The Bedside Companion. Absolutely excellent.